The boardroom felt like a courthouse as I stood facing 12 pairs of eyes. My hands trembled slightly as I pointed to the projection screen, showing the glaring numbers that didn't add up. $300,000. Gone. The math was simple, but the silence in the room was deafening. This discrepancy traces directly back to the Apollo contract, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. The calculations were wrong from the start. William Foster, my boss of 5 years, sat at the head of the mahogany table. His face darkened as every board member turned to look at him. His son Marvin shifted uncomfortably in the corner, no longer wearing that cocky smirk he'd walked in with. "You're out of line, Caitlin." William's voice cut through the air like a blade. His fist slammed against the table, making the water glasses jump. "How dare you embarrass my family in front of the board?" My mouth went dry. This wasn't the reaction I'd expected for catching a massive error that could have cost us millions more. "You're fired," he announced, his eyes burning with rage. "Security will escort you out." The room spun around me. I just saved the company $300,000, and this was my reward. The walk to my office felt endless. Every step echoed in the hallway as my coworkers pretended to be busy, avoiding eye contact. I could feel their pity, mixed with relief that it wasn't them carrying the cardboard box. Security guard Tony walked beside me, looking uncomfortable. "Sorry about this, Caitlin," he whispered. "This ain't right." My hands shook as I packed my desk. Marvin Foster appeared in my doorway, leaning against the frame with his arms crossed. That smirk was back, wider than before. "Guess you should have minded your own business," he said quietly, making sure only I could hear. I wanted to say something, anything, but words failed me. Instead, I clutched my box tighter and walked past him. The elevator doors couldn't close fast enough. Outside, the afternoon sun felt cruel against my burning cheeks. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the humiliation and anger, a small voice whispered, "This isn't over. This is just the beginning." My name is Caitlin Cameron. For 5 years, I was Foster & Associates Client Account Strategist. That fancy title meant I was the one who actually talked to our clients, built relationships, and made sure their million-dollar accounts stayed happy. While William Foster played golf and attended charity dinners, I worked until midnight, making sure every contract was perfect. While his son Marvin coasted through meetings on his father's name, I learned every client's business inside and out. Mrs. Young from Young Industries called me directly when she had problems. The Yuma Corporation sent me Christmas cards every year. Riverside Development invited me to their company picnic, not because I was their vendor, but because I'd become their friend. I didn't just manage accounts. I protected them, nurtured them, and helped them grow. These clients weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet to me. They were relationships I'd built one conversation at a time. That's what William Foster never understood. And now, he was about to learn exactly what he'd just thrown away. A year ago, everything changed when Marvin Foster joined the company. Fresh out of business school with an MBA his father paid for, he walked into a vice president role without earning a single client or closing a single deal. I watched him fumble through presentations, using buzzwords he didn't understand. He'd nod confidently during meetings, then pull me aside afterward, asking what market penetration heal meant. His business plans read like textbook examples, completely disconnected from reality. The first red flag came when he approved the Eureka Industries expansion without reading the fine print. I caught the error just in time, saving us from a lawsuit. William brushed it off as learning experience. Then came the Watson Group fiasco. Marvin promised them services we couldn't deliver at prices that would lose us money. I spent 3 weeks cleaning up that mess, renegotiating terms and salvaging the relationship. Again, William called it growing pains. Each mistake followed the same pattern. Marvin would make a costly error, I'd fix it quietly, and William would pretend it never happened. Meanwhile, Marvin's confidence grew and his recklessness increased. The Apollo contract was just the latest in a string of disasters. But this time, the error was too big to hide, and I was tired of covering for someone who showed no interest in learning from his mistakes. I should have known that honesty would cost me everything. The Apollo contract should have been simple. $300,000 for a 6-month consulting project. Standard terms, standard rates, standard everything. But when I reviewed Marvin's calculations, nothing added up. He'd quoted them half our normal rate, somehow thinking we could deliver premium services at discount prices. When I pointed this out privately, he waved me off. "Trust me, I know what I'm doing," he'd said with that infuriating smirk. But I couldn't let it go. $300,000 wasn't pocket change, even for Foster & Associates. If we honored that contract at Marvin's prices, we'd lose money on every billable hour. I spent 2 days double-checking the numbers, hoping I was wrong. I pulled similar contracts from our files, compared rates, calculated margins. The math was crystal clear. Marvin's deal would cost us exactly $312,000 in losses. I tried approaching William privately first, but his secretary said he was too busy to meet with me. So I did what any responsible employee would do. I brought it to the board meeting, thinking they'd thank me for catching such a massive oversight. Instead, I learned that family loyalty mattered more than company profits. The messenger got shot, while the person who made the mistake got protected. My crime wasn't being wrong about the numbers. My crime was being right at the wrong time. That night, I sat in my kitchen staring at the severance papers William's lawyer had rushed over. 2 weeks' pay for 5 years of loyalty. The insult stung worse than the termination itself. My laptop glowed on the kitchen table, cursor blinking in an empty email draft. Part of me wanted to write an angry message to William, listing every mistake I'd covered for Marvin, every client relationship I'd saved, every late night I'd worked while his son was out partying. But anger wouldn't change anything. William had made his choice. Blood was thicker than competence, and I was just an employee who'd forgotten her place. Instead, I opened my personal files. 5 years of client contacts, project notes, and relationship records. Information I'd gathered on my own time, using my own resources. William could fire me, but he couldn't erase the trust I'd built with our clients. My phone sat silent on the counter, but I knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. Monday morning would bring the first confused calls. Clients would wonder where I was, why I wasn't answering emails, who they were supposed to work with now. The humiliation was fading, replaced by something much more powerful, clarity. I didn't need Foster & Associates, but I was about to find out just how much they needed me. Monday morning arrived with a gentle buzz from my phone. The caller ID showed Young Industries, one of our biggest accounts. I hesitated before answering, unsure how to explain my sudden departure. "Caitlin?" "Thank goodness." Mrs. Young's familiar voice filled my ear. "I've been trying to reach you all weekend about the quarterly review. Your office phone keeps going to voicemail." My throat felt tight. "I'm no longer with Foster & Associates, Mrs. Young, as of Friday afternoon." Silence stretched between us. I could practically hear her mind racing. "What do you mean, no longer with them?" "You're our account manager. You've been handling our projects for 3 years." "I was terminated," I said simply. "I'm sure William will assign someone else to handle your account." "Terminated?" Her voice rose an octave. "Caitlin, you've saved us millions in cost overruns. You've never missed a deadline. This makes no sense." I couldn't tell her about Marvin's mistake or the boardroom confrontation. That would be unprofessional. "Sometimes these things just happen in business," I said carefully. "Well, this is unacceptable," she snapped. "I'm calling William Foster right now. This is absolutely unacceptable." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, heart pounding. Mrs. Young wasn't just upset, she was furious. And she was one of Foster & Associates' most diplomatic clients. If this was her reaction, I could only imagine what the others would say. By Tuesday afternoon, my phone hadn't stopped ringing. Each call followed the same pattern: confusion, disbelief, then anger. Clients who'd worked with me for years couldn't understand how I could just disappear overnight. The Watson Group called at 10 a.m. "Caitlin, we have that presentation tomorrow. Where are the revised numbers you promised?" Riverside Development called at noon. "Our expansion project is hitting snags. We need to talk through the options like we discussed last week." Highland Manufacturing called at 3 p.m. "The new equipment financing isn't looking right. Can you double-check those calculations?" Each conversation was harder than the last. These people trusted me, relied on me, considered me part of their extended business family. Now I had to explain that I couldn't help them anymore. couldn't follow through on promises I'd made, couldn't be there when they needed me. But what struck me most was their reactions. Not one client said, "Well, I'm sure Foster & Associates will find someone else." Not one person seemed confident that the company could handle their needs without me. Instead, I heard frustration, disappointment, and something else. Doubt. Doubt about whether Foster & Associates deserved their business at all. The seeds of rebellion were being planted, one disappointed phone call at a time. Wednesday morning brought the email that changed everything. Highland Manufacturing's CEO, Alan Sanford, had been one of my first clients when I started at Foster & Associates. His message was short but powerful. "Caitlin, I've thought about our conversation yesterday. If you decide to start your own consulting firm, Highland Manufacturing will be your first client. We've worked together for 4 years and you've never let us down. Foster & Associates just lost the best person they had. Their loss could be your gain. Let me know when you're ready to talk business." I read the email 3 times, hardly believing the words. Alan wasn't just offering sympathy or moral support. He was offering to follow me out the door, taking his $1 million annual contract with him. My hands shook as I reached for my coffee mug. This was bigger than I'd dared imagine. I'd been focused on the humiliation of being fired, the unfairness of protecting Marvin while I paid the price. But I'd missed the bigger picture. Clients didn't just work with Foster & Associates, they worked with me. The relationships I'd built weren't owned by the company, they belonged to me. My laptop was already open on the kitchen table. I created a new document and started typing. Cameron Consulting Services, business plan. If Alan Sanford was willing to make the leap, maybe others would follow. For the first time since Friday's disaster, I felt hope creeping back into my chest. Wednesday night, I spread legal documents across my kitchen table like battle plans. Business registration forms, liability insurance applications, client contract templates. The paperwork was overwhelming, but it felt like building something real. I'd spent 5 years helping other companies grow and succeed. Now it was time to build something of my own. The initial costs made my stomach churn: office space, equipment, insurance, legal fees. My savings account could cover the startup expenses, but barely. The hardest part was choosing a name. Cameron Consulting sounded too generic. Strategic Solutions felt like corporate speak. Finally, I settled on Zenith Advisory Services. Professional enough for Fortune 500 clients, personal enough to reflect my hands-on approach. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister. "Mom wants to know if you're okay. Should she be worried about your job situation?" I stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "Tell her I'm building something better." The business license application asked for projected first-year revenue. I started conservatively, then remembered Alan Sanford's email. If Highland Manufacturing was willing to follow me, their annual contract alone would cover my expenses for 6 months. But Highland was just one client. I had relationships with dozens of companies, built over years of late nights and weekend emergencies. The question wasn't whether I could make this work. The question was how many would be willing to take the risk with me. Thursday morning, my inbox exploded. 47 new emails, all from clients asking about my status, expressing concern, or demanding explanations from Foster & Associates. The volume was staggering, but the tone was what really caught my attention. These weren't polite corporate inquiries. These were angry, frustrated messages from people who felt abandoned. Young Industries had sent a formal complaint to William Foster. Watson Group was threatening to audit their current projects. Riverside Development was demanding a meeting with senior leadership, but mixed in with the complaints were offers. Real, concrete offers. Coastal Shipping. "Caitlin, if you're available for independent consulting, we'd love to discuss our expansion project." Premier Electronics. "Foster & Associates isn't the same without you. Are you taking on new clients?" Mountain View Logistics. "We've been thinking about switching firms anyway. Interested in a conversation?" By noon, I'd counted 26 direct offers of business. Companies willing to leave Foster & Associates and work with me directly. The number was growing by the hour. I called Alan Sanford back. "I'm ready to talk business," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Good," he laughed. "Because I've already started telling people about Cameron Consulting Services. Hope you don't mind a little free marketing." My phone buzzed with another email notification. Make that 27 offers. The avalanche was just beginning. Friday morning, I rented a private room at the Riverside Cafe and invited my 3 biggest potential clients for coffee. Alan Sanford arrived first, followed by Patricia Webb from Coastal Shipping, then Michael Levy from Premier Electronics. These 3 companies represented nearly $2.8 million in annual consulting fees. If they committed to working with me, my new business would launch with more revenue than most consultancies see in their first 5 years. Let's be honest, Alan said, stirring sugar into his coffee. We didn't choose Foster & Associates because of William Foster or his son. We chose them because of you. Patricia nodded. You saved us from that shipping disaster in Portland. You personally flew out there on a weekend to sort through the mess. That's not standard service, that's partnership. Michael leaned forward. When our factory fire happened last year, you were on site before our insurance adjuster. You helped us file claims, find temporary space, keep production running. Marvin Foster probably doesn't even know we exist. The conversation continued for 2 hours. By the end, all 3 had verbally committed to transferring their contracts. Alan pulled out his phone and called his lawyer right there at the table, instructing him to draft termination letters for Foster & Associates. Monday morning, he promised, shaking my hand. We'll make this official. Walking back to my car, I felt like I was floating. 3 clients, $2.8 million in annual revenue, and proof that my relationships were stronger than I'd ever imagined. This wasn't just about getting revenge on William Foster. This was about building something better. Back at Foster & Associates, chaos was brewing. My friend Susan from accounting called me Friday evening, whispering like she was sharing state secrets. Caitlin, you need to know what's happening here, she said. William is losing his mind. He's been in emergency meetings all day with the partners. Marvin is locked in his office, making frantic phone calls. I'd expected some reaction, but Susan's description sounded like panic. What kind of meetings? Damage control, she said. 20 clients have filed formal complaints this week. 5 are threatening to terminate their contracts. The partners are asking hard questions about why our best account manager got fired. Susan paused, then continued in an even lower whisper. I overheard William screaming at Marvin about cleaning up his mess. Something about the Apollo contract coming back to haunt them. My stomach tightened. The $300,000 mistake that got me fired was still out there, waiting to explode. William thought he'd solved the problem by silencing me, but math doesn't lie just because you fire the mathematician. What's Marvin doing? I asked, trying to convince remaining clients that everything's fine. Susan laughed bitterly. He scheduled a meeting with Young Industries for Monday morning. Mrs. Young agreed to hear him out, but only if he can explain where their trusted account manager went. I smiled grimly. Marvin was about to learn the difference between confidence and competence, and Mrs. Young wasn't known for her patience with unprepared presentations. Saturday morning, I officially launched Zenith Advisory Services. The business license was approved, the insurance was active, and my first 3 contracts were signed and notarized. Alan Sanford insisted on being client number 1, transferring Highland Manufacturing's account effective immediately. Patricia Webb and Michael Levy followed within hours. By noon, I had $2.8 million in committed annual revenue and a business that existed only on paper. No office, no employees, no overhead. Just me, my laptop, and relationships built over 5 years of honest work. My phone rang constantly. Clients who'd heard through the grapevine were calling to inquire about services. Former colleagues were texting congratulations and asking if I was hiring. Industry contacts were reaching out to offer partnerships and referrals. The number kept climbing. Highland Manufacturing, Coastal Shipping, Premier Electronics, Mountain View Logistics, Riverside Development, Watson Group. By evening, I'd signed 12 clients representing over $5.2 million in annual business. But the real breakthrough came when my phone rang at 8 p.m. The caller ID showed Young Industries. Caitlin, it's Eleanor Young. I had a very interesting conversation with William Foster yesterday. After hearing his explanation for your departure, Highland Manufacturing isn't the only company making changes. Young Industries is terminating our contract with Foster & Associates, effective immediately. 13 clients. $5.7 million in annual revenue, all in one day. I was no longer an unemployed account manager. I was the CEO of the fastest-growing consulting firm in the city. Monday morning brought news of the collapse. Susan called me before 9 a.m., her voice shaking with disbelief. "Caitlin, it's a disaster here. 17 clients terminated their contracts this weekend. The partners called an emergency board meeting for this afternoon. People are talking about layoffs. 17 terminations in one weekend." I felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. These were good people losing their jobs because of William Foster's pride and Marvin's incompetence. "What's William saying?" I asked. "He's trying to blame you," Susan said angrily. "Claiming you stole clients, violated non-compete agreements, acted unethically." But the partners aren't buying it. They've seen the client complaints. They know the real story. Throughout the day, the news kept getting worse for Foster and Associates. Watson Group announced they were conducting a full audit of their current projects. Riverside Development demanded refunds for incomplete work. Premier Electronics filed a formal complaint with the Better Business Bureau. But the real knife came when Highland Manufacturing's CEO gave an interview to the local business journal. Caitlin Cameron was the backbone of Foster and Associates Client Services, Alan Sanford told the reporter. "Firing her was the worst business decision I've seen in 20 years." The article hit the industry website that evening. By the next morning, it had been shared hundreds of times across LinkedIn and industry forums. William Foster's reputation was crumbling in real time, and everyone in the business community was watching it happen. My phone buzzed with client number 18. "We've been following your story. When can we talk?" Marvin Foster was drowning, and his desperation was showing. Susan kept me updated on his increasingly frantic attempts to save face and retain clients. "He scheduled 6 client meetings this week," she reported during our Tuesday evening call. The Young Industries meeting was a complete disaster. Mrs. Young asked him specific questions about her account history, and he couldn't answer any of them. Marvin had never bothered to learn the details of our client relationships. He saw the contracts as numbers on a spreadsheet, not partnerships built on trust and expertise. Now he was trying to rebuild in days what I'd constructed over years. "He's making promises he can't keep," Susan continued. "Yesterday he told Coastal Shipping he could personally handle their expansion project. Caitlin, he doesn't even know what ports they operate out of." The desperation was making Marvin reckless. He was overpromising services, underpricing contracts, and committing to timelines that were impossible to meet. Each promise he made to one client created problems with others. "The worst part," Susan whispered, "is that he's starting to believe his own lies. Yesterday, I heard him tell his father that he could turn this around by the end of the month. William just nodded and walked away. Marvin's arrogance was becoming his downfall. He'd smirked when I got fired, thinking he'd won some kind of victory. Now he was learning that running a business requires more than a famous last name and expensive suits. The Foster and Associates board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. on Wednesday, and the tension in the building was thick enough to cut. Susan texted me regular updates throughout the day. Partners arriving early. Everyone looks grim. William's been in his office with the door closed since 8 a.m. By lunchtime, the news was spreading through the company. Emergency meeting. All department heads required to attend. Rumors about restructuring. Then came the text I'd been expecting. Marvin getting grilled. Partners want explanations for client losses. William trying to defend him but failing badly. The meeting stretched for 3 hours. While I was signing my 21st client contract, William Foster was facing the most difficult afternoon of his career. The partners weren't just upset about the lost revenue. They were angry about being misled. Board demanding full accounting of Apollo contract, Susan texted at 4:30. William looks sick. Marvin hasn't said a word in an hour. The Apollo contract. The $300,000 mistake that got me fired was finally getting the attention it deserved. But now, instead of being a problem that could be quietly fixed, it was evidence of systematic poor judgment and family favoritism. Meeting over. Came the final text at 5:15. William stripped of operational control. Partners taking direct oversight of all major decisions. Marvin's role, undefined. Justice was happening without me having to lift a finger. The truth had a way of surfacing, even when people tried to bury it. From my new home office, I watched the destruction of Foster & Associates with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. I didn't take pleasure in seeing good people lose their jobs, but there was undeniable justice in watching arrogance meet reality. My business was thriving. 24 clients had signed with Zenith Advisory Services, representing over $7.3 million in annual revenue. I'd had to rent temporary office space and hire 2 assistants just to handle the paperwork. The local business community was buzzing with the story. Industry forums were filled with discussions about client loyalty, family businesses, and the importance of merit-based leadership. Several business schools were already using the Foster & Associates collapse as a case study. My phone rang constantly with new opportunities. Companies that had never worked with Foster & Associates were calling, intrigued by the reputation I'd built. Headhunters were offering executive positions at major corporations. But I wasn't interested in working for someone else again. I'd learned too much about the value of independence, the importance of controlling my own destiny. That evening, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee, reading thank you emails from clients who were thrilled with their decision to follow me. These relationships weren't just business transactions. They were partnerships built on mutual respect and trust. William Foster had thought he was firing a troublemaker. Instead, he'd created his biggest competitor. And the best part? I was just getting started. Desperation makes people do terrible things. Marvin Foster, facing the collapse of his inherited empire and his father's growing anger, made a decision that would destroy what little credibility he had left. The first sign of trouble came on Thursday morning when Susan called me in a panic. "Caitlin, something's wrong with the accounts. Money's missing from the client escrow fund." Client escrow accounts were sacred in our business. Money held in trust for specific projects, legally separated from operating expenses. Touching those funds without client authorization wasn't just unethical, it was criminal. "How much is missing?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "At least $800,000, maybe more. The accountants are still figuring it out. But Caitlin, the withdrawal authorizations all have Marvin's signature." My blood ran cold. Marvin wasn't just making bad business decisions anymore. He was stealing client money, probably thinking he could cover it up later when new contracts came in. But there were no new contracts coming in. There was only a shrinking client base and mounting debts. "Does William know?" I asked. "They're in a closed meeting now," Susan whispered. "I can hear shouting through the door. This isn't going to stay quiet much longer." Marvin's desperation had turned into criminality. The smirking young man who'd watched my humiliation was about to learn that some mistakes can't be fixed with Daddy's protection. By Friday morning, the missing money had grown to $1.2 million. The discovery sent shockwaves through Foster & Associates, but the real earthquake was still coming. "Emergency audit ordered," Susan texted me at 10 a.m. "External firm coming in Monday. Partners are furious. William looks broken." The theft wasn't just about the money. It was about trust. Clients who'd already been questioning the company's leadership now had proof that their funds weren't safe. Word was spreading through the business community faster than wildfire. "Client emergency meeting called for this afternoon," Susan continued. "Young Industries demanding immediate return of all escrowed funds. 3 other companies filing similar demands." But the most devastating news came at noon. Marvin cleaned out his office. Security says he left through the parking garage. No one knows where he is. Marvin Foster had vanished, leaving his father to face the consequences of covering for his son's mistakes. The young man who'd built his career on his family name had abandoned that family when accountability finally arrived. I thought about William Foster sitting in his corner office, probably staring out the window and wondering how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. 6 months ago, he'd been the respected head of a successful consulting firm. Now he was facing potential criminal charges for his son's actions. The collapse was complete. Foster & Associates was finished, and everyone in the industry knew it. The investigation moved quickly. External auditors arrived Monday morning and immediately discovered the full extent of Marvin's theft. The missing $1.2 million was just the beginning. He'd also forged client signatures, falsified project reports, and created fake invoices to cover his tracks. Susan called me with updates throughout the week. FBI showed up Tuesday morning. They're treating this as wire fraud now. William's lawyer is here every day. The federal investigation changed everything. This wasn't just a family business dispute anymore. It was a criminal case that would destroy reputations and potentially send people to prison. Client lawsuits starting to pile up, Susan continued. Young Industries is suing for full damages plus legal fees. Highland Manufacturing joined the class action. The insurance company is refusing to cover theft by company officers. Meanwhile, my phone kept ringing with new business. Companies fleeing Foster & Associates were seeking refuge at Zenith Advisory Services. I'd stopped counting new clients at 50. The number was growing too fast to track. William's completely broken down, Susan reported on Thursday. He keeps asking how he didn't see this coming. The partners have locked him out of all financial systems. His own company won't trust him with petty cash. The man who'd fired me for catching his son's mistake was now paying the price for every mistake he'd covered up. The irony was perfect, but the human cost was devastating. The board meeting that sealed William Foster's fate happened on Friday afternoon. I wasn't there, of course, but Susan provided a detailed account of the proceedings. Complete disaster, she texted immediately afterward. William walked in thinking he could negotiate some kind of settlement. Instead, the partners had legal papers ready. The charges against William weren't just about Marvin's theft. They were about systematic failure of oversight, breach of fiduciary duty, and creating the environment that allowed the fraud to happen. Stripped of all authority, Susan continued, banned from client contact, personal assets frozen pending investigation. Partners are treating him like a criminal. The man who'd once commanded respect in boardrooms across the city was now sitting alone in his office, waiting for security to escort him out. His career was over, his reputation destroyed, his family legacy tarnished beyond repair. He kept asking about you, Susan told me during our evening phone call, wondering if you knew this would happen, if you'd somehow planned all of this. I hadn't planned anything except building a better business. I'd simply done what William taught me not to do. I'd told the truth about problems instead of covering them up. The consequences had cascaded from there, each revelation leading to the next until the entire structure collapsed. Building cleared out came Susan's final text of the day. William Foster escorted out by security. 30-year career ended with a cardboard box and a police escort. Marvin Foster's disappearance made national news when the FBI issued a warrant for his arrest. The story had everything journalists loved: family business drama, missing money, a fugitive heir, and a whistleblower who'd built an empire from the ashes. Marvin Foster, son of disgraced businessman William Foster, is wanted on federal charges of wire fraud and embezzlement, the news anchor reported. The younger Foster disappeared last week after allegedly stealing over $1.2 million from client accounts. The story painted me as the hero, the honest employee who'd tried to stop the corruption and been fired for her integrity. Reporters called constantly, wanting interviews about workplace ethics and corporate accountability. But the real vindication came from my clients. Highland Manufacturing's CEO gave a statement to the press. Caitlin Cameron saved our company from potential fraud. Firing her was the best thing that ever happened to our business relationship. My phone rang with offers from across the country. Companies that had heard about the Foster & Associates scandal wanted to work with the consultant who'd exposed it. Zenith Advisory Services was becoming a national brand built on trust and transparency. Meanwhile, the search for Marvin Foster continued. Last seen boarding a flight to the Cayman Islands, one report claimed. Believed to have accessed offshore accounts established months before his disappearance. The son who'd smirked at my firing had become an international fugitive, while I'd become the most sought-after consultant in the industry. 6 months later, I stood in the conference room of my new corporate headquarters, looking out at a team of 30 employees serving clients across 5 states. Zenith Advisory Services had grown beyond my wildest dreams, fueled by a reputation for integrity and excellence. The Foster & Associates building sat empty across town, a for sale sign marking the end of what had once been a respected firm. William Foster had lost everything: his business, his reputation, his freedom. The criminal charges had resulted in a 3-year prison sentence for conspiracy and fraud. Marvin Foster remained a fugitive. Interpol had traced him to several countries, but he'd managed to stay ahead of the law using money stolen from his father's clients. The FBI estimated he'd hidden nearly $2 million in offshore accounts before his disappearance. My former colleagues had scattered to other companies, their careers damaged by association with the scandal. But I'd hired the best ones, offering them a chance to rebuild their reputations at a company that valued honesty over politics. I don't celebrate the destruction of Foster & Associates or the imprisonment of William Foster. But I'm proud of the company we've built from those ashes. A place where catching mistakes is rewarded, not punished.